One of the difficulties here is that the law prohibits grossly offensive messages, and we've got to work within the law as it is. It occurs to me that amongst the many million communications that go on daily, quite a number would fall within that category. So we've got to see how the Crown Prosecution Service can act as some sort of filter or gatekeeper. The emerging thinking in the round tables is that it might be sensible to divide and separate cases where there's a campaign of harassment and social media is being used as the means of harassment, and cases where there's a credible and genuine threat, put them on one side and prosecute in those sorts of cases. But to put in another category, communications which are, as it were, merely offensive or grossly offensive. Doesn't mean the second category are ring-fenced from prosecution, but it does, I think, enable us to look at that group in a slightly different way.
How high then on that second subset? How high must the bar be? Because we've heard of people obviously going to jail for saying unpleasant things about missing children. Other people have been fined and given community service for saying unpleasant things about dead British soldiers. In your view in future, is that the sort of thing that it should be criminally investigated?
I think the threshold for prosecution has to be high.
Higher than I've just described?
Well, we live in a democracy, and if free speech is to be protected, there has to be a high threshold. People have the right to be offensive, they have the right to be insulting, and that has to be protected.
Well, that's pretty clear.
Context is everything, and I think the difficult cases so far have involved comments that have been made in a situation which is highly charged or emotional, and judgment calls have to be made about the particular context. But this is not easy. If this was easy, we wouldn't be having this debate. These are particularly difficult judgment calls. What I want to achieve is consistency and a fair balance in these cases.
But in future, for example, Matthew Woods, who was jailed for making comments when he did about the missing girl, April Jones, does that cross the bar?
Well, in that case, as you know, he pleaded guilty. The court sentenced him in the way they did. There are clearly strong views on either side here. Some say that's an infringement of free speech. On the other hand, the courts have taken it seriously. I think if one looks at what was actually said and asks the question, was it grossly offensive? I think the answer is yes, it was. There was some particularly offensive comments made. What I want to achieve in the guidelines is a sense of which of even the grossly offensive cases require a criminal prosecution.
It sounds like you'd like to see far fewer prosecutions.
I think if there are a lot of prosecutions, it'll have a chilling effect on free speech. And I think that's a very important consideration.
And who's going to police it? Are Facebook and Twitter going to have to take on thousands of extra staff, or will it be, as it seems to be at the moment, left to users to police?
One of the participants in the round table was the policy director of Facebook, and I'm trying to set up meetings with the service providers, really to say to them, you've got a responsibility here. In many of these cases, the appropriate response may be for you to take this material down swiftly, and that may reduce the requirements for a criminal prosecution.
Are Facebook and Twitter and social media going to be treated differently? Is it going to be easier to be offensive on them still than it is on radio, on television, or in newspapers?
No, I think the thing about radio and television is there's a degree of regulation in any event. The thing about social media, Twitter, Facebook, is that the individual can move very swiftly from communicating to a few people to broadcasting to millions.
But my point is they're all integrated now, aren't they?
Oh yes, but I mean the offence covers all those types of communication, and that's where the problem lies.
Well, yes, but if I was to lie about you on television, if I was to sit here and say, I don't know, that you made up all your qualifications and you do unspeakable things to farm animals, the BBC, Ofcom, who knows? They'd come down on me like a ton of bricks. But if I tweeted that about you, judging by what you're telling me, you would just have to accept the offence.
Well, where there's a regulator, obviously I'd be able to complain to the regulator, and there may be a case for some sense of regulating in this area that is unregulated. But at the moment, we have an overarching criminal offence that applies to all those communications. And I think that's part of the problem, because if a criminal response is the only available response, then there might be the temptation to resort too quickly to that response, whereas in other fields or other areas, the appropriate route might be by way of complaint or some other remedy.
Thank you very much.